Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my ultimate free hit guide for Game Week 32. We will discuss the best defenders, midfielders and forwards to own. We'll have a discussion around the best Arsenal and Liverpool assets, my favourite differentials and also show you the best draft according to AI. If you're enjoying the content here on this channel, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So for these first three sections, we've got the projected points per Fantasy Football Hub for the defenders, midfielders, and the forwards. This isn't my opinion. This is according to Fantasy Football Hub. A few things go into this: the underlying data of the player, the fixture that they've got, and also their projected minutes as well. So if a player doesn't tend to start every single game, of course, their projected minutes will be slightly lower, and as a result, their points might be slightly lower than you would expect if they were to play 90 minutes. And we'll discuss that throughout as well. One thing to note with Fantasy Football Hub is that they tend to really like home fixtures. So you'll see quite a few players might be slightly lower down than you would have thought. Even the fact that they might have a decent fixture with decent underlying data, if it's an away game, it tends to drop them a point or two on the projected points. So that is something to take into account. So starting with the top three defenders, as you can see, they are all Liverpool assets. And you'll see when we go through the defence, midfield and the forwards, Liverpool assets rank very highly. They continue to put up really strong data, as we'll discuss when we move on to the Liverpool section. They've got a very, very good fixture. And the data as a team actually isn't that bad. Defensively, the data's not great, but they're attacking well. And especially going forward, the data's really, really strong. So Trent, Van Dijk and Robertson, the top three. As you would expect, Trent comes out on top. Not much to separate Van Dijk and Robertson. And to be honest, there's not a lot to separate them across the last few seasons. Van Dijk puts up some seriously good numbers. His minutes are a little bit more secure than Robertson, and he's actually quite good for bonus points. So I will always say that I prefer Trent if you're going to go for a Liverpool defender. If you can't afford Trent, or you want to go slightly different, or you want to go for a double up, I don't think there's a massive amount to separate Van Dijk and Robertson. Van Dijk will give you slightly greater goal threat, Robertson slightly greater assist threat. But I think at the very least, for Game Week 32, if you're free hitting, in my opinion, you need at least one Liverpool defender. I think the double up is definitely worth considering as well. After the Liverpool assets, it's mostly Trippier, as you would expect. Again, data really strong. Newcastle are an excellent defence, and Tottenham aren't attacking particularly well at the moment. So Trippier's there. And then you've mainly got Arsenal defenders. You can see Zinchenko, Gabriel, White, and then holding a little bit lower down. You don't need me to sit here again and tell you that Arsenal have a really, really good fixture, and you probably would like one Arsenal defender. My issue with the Arsenal defence, as we'll discuss when we move on to Arsenal in more detail, is their data is okay, but they don't have a massive amount of upside. I don't think you will regularly see attacking returns from the likes of Zinchenko, Gabriel and White. Whereas I think with Trent and Robertson, it's a lot more likely because their data is a lot stronger. So I wonder, is it actually better to go for a triple up on the Arsenal attack and miss out on the defence? And we've seen in recent weeks, Arsenal have been leaking a few goals. I'm recording this directly after the West Ham-Arsenal game. They conceded a fair few chances to West Ham, so that is something to consider there. You can see that the first player to sneak in that you might not expect is Castagna. Leicester aren't very good defensively, but Castagna does put up some decent data, and it is a decent fixture against Wolves at home, so I don't mind Castagna in there. Some of the other notable players in here, you can see there are three Crystal Palace defenders: Mitchell, Gahey, and Anderson. Crystal Palace look really, really good under Roy Hodgson. Their defensive data is pretty strong across the season as well, to be fair. It's not brilliant, but it's not terrible, and it is a really nice home fixture against Everton. So I would say that if you aren't going to go for three defenders from Liverpool and Arsenal, and maybe a Trippier in there, and you're looking for kind of a third cheaper asset, I think you can do a lot worse than a Crystal Palace defender. And in a lot of my drafts, I've got normally one of Gahey or Anderson, hoping for a goal from a corner, and also hoping for a clean sheet against Everton. You can see as well that the Newcastle defence is kind of favoured. So as well as Trippier being in there, Fabian Schär and Botman are relatively high up. I'm not so sure about this one. I know Tottenham aren't fantastic, but I feel like there are better fixtures to target, especially on a free hit. We're not talking about owning these assets long term. I think there are better fixtures to target for me at least. But if you want to just cover that Newcastle defence, because it will be very, very highly owned still, it might be quite a safe and protective play. If like you're top of your mini league or you're really happy with your rank, maybe go for an Arsenal defender. Some other notable inclusions in there. We can see a couple of Brentford defenders as well, Henry and me. Smith from Bournemouth. Bournemouth are a team that are improving. I don't hate that at all against West Ham. And then Robinson in there from Fulham too. So those are the defenders. Basically, if you can, get a Liverpool asset, maybe an Arsenal one, and then in and around that, you're probably looking at either a Newcastle or a Crystal Palace defender. Let's now move on to the midfield. So moving on to the midfield, I'm not going to discuss the Arsenal and Liverpool assets in tons of detail here because I've got a more detailed section around that a little bit later. But as you can see, Salah is well and truly clear at the top. Now, these projected points are assuming he's still on penalties. I don't think that would have been updated yet. If he's not on penalties, which maybe we will find out on Monday Night Football, that will drop his projected points slightly, but his data is still really strong. And considering money isn't going to be an issue in this free hit, when I've built free hit drafts, I've got plenty of money in the bank. I don't think Salah's value is important. I think you just consider him as a player, and I think he's one of the best options, if not the best options, for Game Week 32 free hit. And to be honest, at the moment, he's probably going to be my captain, unless I see someone that I particularly like instead. There are some other decent options, but at the moment, Salah has that. You can see Saka, Ødegaard, and Martinelli in there as well. And Gakpo, if Gakpo starts, projected to do fairly well by Fantasy Football Hub. So outside of the Liverpool and Arsenal assets, there are a few really interesting options. Maddison is on 5.3, and I'll actually be honest, a little bit of a teaser for later on in the week. In my latest draft, Maddison is in my free hit. I know a lot of people won't like that, but his data is actually very strong. Leicester are still creating chances. They're just lacking a bit of confidence in front of goal, but Maddison had one or two really good chances. He had a one-on-one against Man City. I feel like it is coming with Leicester, and I feel like if Iheanacho and Maddison can finally link up, then they could both get some monster hauls. And Wolves haven't been as good defensively this season as they have in previous seasons. So I really don't mind Maddison. You can actually see Willian in there as well, and Andreas is a little bit lower. I don't mind the Fulham assets. Leeds really haven't been very good defensively, and Willian and Andreas both have relatively decent data. Andreas is going to be on penalties in the absence of Mitrovic, maybe Willian, I suppose, but likely to be Andreas. So I don't mind the Fulham assets. So consider those two. You can also see there's quite a few West Ham assets here. Now, Bournemouth are improving, but I still think this is a relatively good fixture. So Bowen, for some reason, Souček is there, Paqueta and Benrahma. Of course, Benrahma and Bowen both scored today. I think I prefer Bowen just for certainty of minutes. Benrahma could start and is probably likely to start, but that's not 100% sure. And he's unlikely to get 90 minutes, whereas Bowen tends to get 90 minutes in most games. I do like Paqueta as well. He's creating chances for his teammates. But for me, it would be Bowen or Benrahma. I love the fact that Benrahma's on penalties. It just worries me slightly that he's not dead sure to start. And in a free hit, to lose one of your biggest differential spots because the player doesn't start would be a little bit frustrating. So maybe it would put me off Benrahma slightly, but I do really like him as an option. He's got slightly better data than Bowen, and he's on penalty. So I feel like if you can get away with starting him and you're confident that he will start for West Ham, he's probably a slightly better option, and he's cheaper as well if you do need the money. Outside of that, there are a few interesting options on there. You can see Thiago's randomly on there. I've got no idea why. I personally wouldn't be going for him. Elise and Eze, I know will be very, very popular this week. I'm still a little bit unsure about this. Under Roy Hodgson, so far, in a very limited sample size, Crystal Palace have looked very good, and Everton have not been. And it is at home, so it's a home fixture for Crystal Palace. I'm still unsure that I expect them to continue scoring at quite the rate they are. And I wonder if when everyone else is loading up on the likes of Elise and Eze, if you go for someone like a Maddison or a Bowen, because most of us will have like Salah, Saka, Martinelli, you've probably only got one midfield spot spare. I quite like the idea of going for someone really different, like a Heung-min Son or a Benrahma or a Maddison. That could be a really, really nice punt in there when everyone else is going to be loading up on these Crystal Palace assets. Remember, you don't get their points from previous weeks. I'm not saying they won't continue to score, but you need to almost wipe that from your memory. Elise and Eze, do you think they will score against Everton? If you do, then of course you should put them in your team. I actually slightly prefer Eze to Elise. When you look at the data, Eze's actually got a greater goal threat than Elise, whereas Elise has slightly better expected assists. So I feel like if you're looking for someone that's going to get you goals, Eze's probably that player. I know he's just scored a brace as well. Maybe that's fresh in our memory, but he does tend to have slightly better data. Outside of that, you can see like Willock, Joelinton in there. But again, I'm not really targeting that Newcastle Spurs game, and Kulusevski too. So for me, Salah, one or two of the Arsenal assets in there. Then it comes down to that fourth midfield spot really in the free hit for most of us. Where do you want to go with it? My favourite options would be Maddison, Bowen, Elise and Eze, and then maybe Benrahma, Heung-min Son in there as a fifth option. So moving on to the forwards. Obviously, we can have a maximum of 3 forwards, but I think a lot of people will probably be on a 3-5-2 for the free hit 32, just because the midfield look really strong. Regardless, I don't think there will be a massive amount of difference between most of the forwards we pick. Gabriel Jesus looks absolutely brilliant at the moment. He tops the list at 5.6 projected points. I think a lot of people will have him. Maybe they'll have a Darwin instead or alongside Jesus. And then you've got lots of really solid, reliable penalty takers, the likes of Tony, Kane, Watkins. I'm not saying they're reliable at taking penalties, but they're reliable in getting points, and they're on penalties, and they're talismanic. So I feel like most of our front lines will probably look something like Jesus, Watkins, and then Kane, Tony, Darwin. It's really up to you which ones you want to pick, to be honest, because they've got great data. They've all got decent fixtures, and you've all got very, very similar projected points. I know a lot of players have been missing penalties recently, but I tend to love penalties. If you can pick a player that has good data and is on penalties, more often than not, they will score those penalties. So I don't think you should let that put you off that players have been missing penalties recently. A penalty is still like a 0.8 XG opportunity to score a goal. And I would rather have a penalty taker than not. So realistically, at the moment, I do love the look of Gabriel Jesus. He's come back straight away into that Arsenal team. He's made them better. I still don't think he's the best FPL asset just because he's not particularly good at scoring goals. I know he did score, obviously, in game week 31, but he's not fantastic at scoring goals. He tends to accumulate quite a high XG, but doesn't always deliver on that. So I still am unsure about him long-term as an option, but in a free hit, I feel like he's got a very, very high ceiling. We've seen that both at Man City and Arsenal. He can get some pretty monster hauls. So Jesus is probably going to end up in one of my drafts. And then it's just, which of the other two assets do I want? I really do like the look of Tony because I think a lot of people will load up on Aston Villa players. Aston Villa have been very, very good in recent weeks, but Tony is still Tony. Really strong data. Brentford will score goals this season, and Tony's usually involved. And again, he is on penalties. I know he missed one recently, but he tends to be very, very reliable from the spot. So I like Tony, and it's difficult to argue against Ollie Watkins at the moment. The man is literally on fire. You would have to be a very, very brave person to bet against him. So that would be my three, but then you look at someone like a Harry Kane. Do you want to bet against Harry Kane? He's so, so reliable. I know he didn't score against Bournemouth, but I think he scored 4 weeks in a row before that. And then outside of that, you've got really good options such as Darwin, Solanke. I even like Bamford as a punt too. It is quite difficult to pick 2 or 3 forwards from this list. I think you've just got to be confident in your choice. Go with the ones that you think will do well. The ones that I really like as differentials we'll discuss in the differential section later in the video. That would be Solanke and Bamford. But I do feel like there are potentially more reliable options with slightly better data that you could go for in the likes of Tony and Watkins. So those are the forwards. I would love to know down below because I feel like this is one of the more difficult places to pick. Which are the 2 or 3 forwards that you're currently going with on your free hit draft? So I've been discussing Arsenal assets throughout the video, but I thought I'd have a dedicated section to discussing my favourite Arsenal assets to own. A lot of people wondering, should you go for the triple attack? Should you go for maybe double defence and 1 attacker? Do we still want Saka after the penalty miss and the recent drop-off in data? So let's discuss all of that. So I've got their price, their projected points, big chance involvement, and non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 post-World Cup. And then I've got a Raptor ranking, which is basically ranking my favourite assets from Arsenal just for free hit 32. Of course, this doesn't include their data from game week 31 because I'm recording this directly after their game against West Ham. So, projected points-wise, as we've sort of seen throughout the video, Saka is still favoured by the algorithm, and so is Ødegaard, and that's mainly just due to their nailedness and their expected minutes. Their data for both Ødegaard and Saka isn't fantastic. You can see Ødegaard at a 0.47 non-penalty expected goal involvement, and Saka at a 0.54. And to be honest, Saka and Ødegaard all season haven't shown the best data. They've actually had lower data than Martinelli for pretty much the entirety of the season. So I don't dislike Ødegaard and Saka by any means, but they're probably not my favourite 2 assets just because the data's not there. And now with Saka missing that penalty in game week 31, we don't even know if Saka's still going to be on penalties. We've seen Jesus take them in the past. We've seen Martinelli take them in the past as well. Will someone potentially take them off him? Especially if Jesus or Martinelli win the penalty, potentially they'll want to take that ahead of Saka. So I don't think Saka is essential on your free hit. That isn't to say that I don't think he's a good option. I wouldn't let the penalty put you off picking him, but I would just say that the data coupled with the fact we don't know if he's on penalties and also the eye test in recent weeks, he doesn't look quite at it. He's still been good, but he doesn't look quite at it like he was earlier in the season. I don't know if that's fatigue. I don't know if that's something else mental going on. But I don't think that Saka's essential in your free hits. My favourite 2 Arsenal assets would be Martinelli and Jesus. Martinelli's been exceptional. I sold Martinelli and White. I can't remember when it was. Let me know down below if you remember. Was it around sort of game week 26, 27? I sold both Martinelli and Ben White. And since then, they've been absolutely smashing it, the pair of them. Especially Martinelli. He's been exceptional. We thought he was going to be a minute's risk. At the moment, he looks absolutely nailed on. He's their best attacker by some distance, in my opinion. You can see his big chance involvement per 90 is really strong. His non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 is really strong as well. And as you can see by the Raptor ranking, if I were to only choose one Arsenal asset, it would be Martinelli at the moment. So Martinelli is locked into all of my drafts. I see no reason why I wouldn't pick him unless we think for some reason Martinelli is going to be dropped for someone like Trossard. But I think Martinelli is nailed on at the moment. He's been absolutely exceptional. My second favourite asset is probably Gabriel Jesus. But I would just take these stats with a pinch of salt because in these stats, he's only played something like 200 minutes post-World Cup. But you can see big chance involvement per 90, 3.03. non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 over 1. But across the entire season, Gabriel Jesus has ridiculously strong data. But he does remind me of Darwin. He accumulates a very, very, very high XG, but doesn't always finish those opportunities. So he can be a very frustrating own, but in a single game week, as I said earlier in the video, I feel like he has a massively high ceiling, especially for a forward. Forwards in general don't tend to get those massive hauls because even if a forward scores 3 goals and they get a hat-trick, they only score 17 points. But Jesus, I feel like, has that in his locker. If he does score all of the chances he gets, as you can see here, 3 big chance involvement per 90 in the limited sample we've got, he can go massive. So for that reason, in most of my drafts, I've got Martinelli and Jesus. My only issue with Jesus is I do like a lot of the other strikers, as I said, like Solanke, Tony, Kane, Watkins, Isak I like as an option, Bamford. I think there are a lot of other really nice options. So that's my only slight concern with Jesus, is that he's got to try and compete with some of those other guys. Looking at the defenders, I don't mind the defence. It's still a good fixture. I would still hope for and expect a clean sheet from your Arsenal defender. I just don't feel like their ceiling is that high in comparison to the attackers. So at the moment, in most of my drafts, I've got triple Arsenal attack. But if I were to be going for a defender, it would probably just about be Zinchenko, assuming he is fit for Game Week 32. I know he wasn't fit for Game Week 31. If he's not, I actually slightly prefer Ben White to Gabriel. That isn't just because he got the assist in Game Week 31. It's actually because his data is slightly better and his big chance involvement is slightly better too. So on the free hit, in my opinion, triple Arsenal attack has the highest ceiling. If you're going to go for a double attack and 1 defender, it would be Jesus, Martinelli, and Ben White for me. Let me know down below in the comments which Arsenal triple up will you be owning for Game Week 32. So moving on to the Liverpool assets, and there's probably no surprise at all that my favourite assets from Liverpool are Salah and Trent. That isn't just based off previous seasons, that's also based on the data and just the players that I feel confident will deliver points. As far as we know, Salah is still on penalties. I think there's a good chance that Fabinho will take penalties if he's on the pitch, and maybe even someone like Henderson instead. But as far as we know, Salah is still on them. Regardless, as you can see here, his non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 is still 0.74. So even if you remove penalties, Salah still has really, really strong data. He's still projected to get the highest points. He's still got one of the highest big chance involvements per 90 on this list. So for me, Salah is still my favourite Liverpool asset if I were to only own one. And you really can't overlook Trent either. I know Liverpool aren't defending well, and if you want to back Liverpool to concede, maybe you go without him. But as you can see here, he's got a 0.43 non-penalty expected goal involvement, which is the same as Gakpo. Trent's data going forward as an attacker is the same as one of their most attacking players, Gakpo. So with Trent, even if he doesn't keep a clean sheet, he gets more points for a goal. I would just go for Trent over someone like a Gakpo purely through attacking threat. Also, he's on some set pieces as well, which offers him more routes to points. So for me, you can't really, like, he's got the similar data to Jota as well, much better than Robertson and Van Dijk. For me, Trent is that guy as the second asset. So Trent and Salah have been locked into every single draft for me when I've been making free hit drafts. That third spot is really, really tricky. If you told me confidently, if you told me that you knew the starting 11 and that Darwin would be starting, I would pick Darwin probably. My issue with Darwin is 2 things. As I said with Gabriel Jesus, I don't really like the fact that he's a forward because I think I like a lot of the other forwards. I really like Solanke, Tony and Watkins at the main 3. I've actually had quite a few drafts with exactly that front 3, Tony, Solanke, Watkins, which doesn't offer me a spot to go for Jesus and Darwin. So because you only get 3 spots, I find it quite tricky to choose. So that's one thing I don't like. And also, similarly to Jesus, he doesn't convert a lot of his chances. So yes, his data is strong, but we've seen across the season, I actually think he's the biggest underperformer of his expected data in the Premier League this year. So he's very frustrating. If you own Jesus and Darwin, they could absolutely pop off both of them and get you 15 points each, or they could get you 1 or 2 points and really, really frustrate you. I almost feel like it might be a risk worth taking, though. So at the moment, just about, Darwin is my third favoured option. Outside of that, I do really like Robertson, and Robertson's data still appears to be quite strong, 0.31 non-penalty expected goal involvement. If I am to go for someone other than Darwin, I think it would be a Trent and Robertson double up alongside Salah. I know you've got the likes of Firmino, Gakpo, Jota here, but I don't know who's going to start. I would predict that Salah's going to start. I would expect Darwin to start. So you've only got 1 spot then for Jota. Diaz is now back as well. I've not put him here because he's literally only just back from injury. And Gakpo. So there's basically like four players all trying to squeeze into 1 remaining spot. So for that reason, I just don't think I would take a risk on any of the other attackers. I don't mind Van Dijk, but for me, considering there's not a massive difference in the pricing, I feel like Trent and Robertson are the slightly better double up there. So At the moment, in most of my drafts, it's Trent and Salah, and then I'm just rotating between Darwin and Robertson, depending on which players I want. The reason I love Robertson is I'm not a massive fan of many of the other defenders, so I feel like I've almost got a spare slot in my defence that I can put Robertson. Because I love loads of the other strikers, in many of my drafts, I've not got Darwin. But again, similarly to the Arsenal section, I would love to know down below, are you going to own 3 Liverpool assets? And if so, who is your triple up? So I thought it might also be useful to just list some of my favourite differentials. We've discussed some of these players already throughout the video, but these are some of the players that I think I've not looked at ownership. I don't think will be overly popular on the free hit, but that I do think are still good options. So if you're looking at this and thinking, I want to play my free hit this week, but everyone's team looks the same. We've all got triple Arsenal, triple Liverpool. We've all got Eze and Elise. If you want to go slightly different, then these are the players that I would potentially consider. The only one on here that I would argue maybe isn't a massive differential is Solanke, just because he's got a lot of points recently, and also West Ham look really poor. But I still don't know that he'll be that highly owned, and I'm struggling to get him into my team. Again, the reason for that is most of us will have Watkins. A lot of us will want one or both of Jesus and Darwin. And then you've got Tony and Kane there as well. So trying to fit a Solanke in there is quite difficult. We'll actually start with Solanke. Really strong data, actually. Non-penalty, so removing his penalties, expected goal involvement per 90 post-World Cup is 0.57. And one of my major issues with Solanke always is that he always looks pretty good, but he doesn't get that many big chances. And his data is never very, very strong. It's actually been really strong recently. And Bournemouth are a side that are improving throughout the season. So I really like Solanke. Excellent fixture. West Ham do not look good defensively at the moment. And I feel like you can definitely do worse. And again, if you are struggling with money slightly, he's very, very cheap at 5.5. So Solanke is one of my favourite differentials, if you can call him that. Outside of that, who are some of my other favourites? I feel like someone like an Andreas will definitely go under the radar, mainly because we've all got so much money in these free hit drafts that you probably won't need to go cheap with your players. So everyone tends to pick expensive players. Let me give you an example. If you've picked your team and you've got 13 million in your final midfield spot, not many people would say, for that final spot, I'm going to go for Andreas. You feel like you almost need to use that money. So they'll go, right, I might go for a Heung-min Son instead. I think there's a bit of psychology in that, wanting to spend all of your available money. And as a result, I don't think many people will be going with Andreas. His data's been pretty strong all season, and in the absence of Mitrovic, we do think he'll be on penalty, so I don't mind him there. I've got Edouard and Costa as 2 potential striker options if you want. I just feel like there are too many other really strong strikers, to be honest, but if you want to go super differential, both of those look pretty good at the moment. I've got Iheanacho on here. Iheanacho's data is so good consistently always. He's always putting up ridiculous data season upon season. His non-penalty expected goal involvement is 0.82. If in a single week Iheanacho actually finishes the chances that Maddison creates for him, he will go ballistic and get you 3 or 4 goals. So if you feel like there is a week that will happen, I really like Iheanacho. And for a similar reason, I really like Maddison as well. He's creating so many chances for Iheanacho and for his teammates that if Leicester do click in 1 week, which they haven't for a while, so if you don't think that will happen, don't worry at all. But if you think there is a week that they'll click, Maddison and Iheanacho could go massive. And because you don't really want to own the likes of Maddison and Iheanacho long term, the free hit is a perfect opportunity to take that risk there. I've also got Bamford and Bowen, the 2 Bs. Really average data for both of them, but we've seen in the past how good Bowen can be. He scored in 31. Is he potentially going to go on a roll now? And Bamford's data is really poor actually this season. However, he is on penalties, and you would expect Leeds to go after Fulham, so I don't hate that as a fixture. And I definitely think you can do worse than Bamford. And then just to finish off, we spoke about him earlier, Heung-min Son. Very, very expensive, but if you've got the funds, he's been scoring a few goals recently, and he's starting to get back to a vein of form where he looks like half the player that he was last season, which is still pretty decent. So if you want to jump on form and you feel like form is a thing, Son is definitely improving in recent weeks, and he's starting to get back to where he was. So I don't mind that as a punt. But again, he's going up against Newcastle. I feel like there are definitely better fixtures to target. So from the differentials, my favourite options would be Solanke, Maddison, and then maybe Bowen and Iheanacho if you want to take a real punt. But Solanke and Maddison would be my favourite too. So guys, I thought I would just finish off with showing you Fantasy Football Hub's best recommended team for Game Week 32, which is essentially the best free hit team that you can build under budget. And it is very, very strong. And I don't think it's too dissimilar from the free hit drafts that I've put together. If you would like to see my free hit draft, by the way, I'm not going to do it in this video because it's already long enough and I'm playing my free hit this week. So later in the week, probably on Thursday morning, I will be releasing my free hit team selection. So do make sure to subscribe if you want to see that. It's not too dissimilar, but there are a few spots that I do disagree. So Sam Johnstone in goal, I think, is good. Crystal Palace look good. I think that's a strong fixture defensively against Everton. They've gone for the double up on the Liverpool defence with Trent and Van Dijk as opposed to Trent and Robertson. I don't dislike that. They've, of course, got Trippier in there. I'm not sure I'm going to have Trippier. I feel like there are better fixtures to target, and it's an opportunity to go against the crowd. If Newcastle concede, those that aren't on a free hit, which is still going to be quite a few people, will probably have at least one, probably two Newcastle defenders. So it is a big risk, but I feel like it's an opportunity to take advantage of your free hit and pick some other players. The midfield is really strong. Salah, Saka, Ødegaard, and Maddison. I would personally argue that Martinelli is a better option than both Saka and Ødegaard at the moment. So I would want probably Martinelli in there. And then I might want a Crystal Palace midfielder either on the bench or in the starting 11 too. But otherwise, really, really strong. And a front three of Jesus, Tony, and Danny Ings. I'm not sure about Danny Ings myself. Expected minutes are obviously relatively low. He's not on penalties as long as Ben Rama's on the pitch. So I feel like there are slightly better options than Ings. But I do like Tony and Jesus. Maybe slapping someone like an Ollie Watkins or a Solanke in that third spot would be really nice. And then an okay bench of Willian. Again, Willian's not a bad option at all. Mitchell and Mark Gahey. So I don't mind this as a team. I just thought it would be interesting to show you what the AI or the artificial intelligence predicts is the best team for Game Week 32. I would agree with maybe 5 or 6 of those and then just change around the final few spots just with some of the picks that I like. Let me know down below, are you free hitting for 32? If so, feel free to drop your draft below, drop any of your dilemmas as well, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 32 Ultimate Free Hit Guide. Hopefully it was helpful for you. Even if you're not on the free hit, hopefully it was helpful too. If you did enjoy today's video, please do drop a like. It really helps to support the channel. And also make sure to subscribe too. We are on the road to 70,000 subscribers before the end of the season. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.